Failing that, you can always email us at rankings@qs.com. Second of all, at the end of the webinar session, when we finish up, there will be a survey which will pop up on your screen. We'd really appreciate it if you can fill that in. It just provides us with some quick feedback on the session, so you can tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see in future, and it just helps us model these sessions to make sure we're giving you the information that you require. So without further ado, we can kick off. So today's presentation will explore how universities worldwide are performing across key sustainability dimensions, environmental, social and governance, or ESG as they're commonly known. And these rankings reflect broader institutional commitments to shaping a sustainable future. So with over 2,000 institutions ranked across 108 locations, this year's edition marks a significant expansion in global engagement, data transparency, and student-driven priorities. So in today's session, we'll be walking through the methodology behind the rankings, highlighting key trends and movements, and showcasing standout performers in terms of locations. The briefing will also connect the rankings to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, student expectations, and institutional strategies, offering insights into how sustainability is reshaping higher education. So just to introduce ourselves, so first of all, my name is Sam Duke. I'm a ranking specialist here at QS, and I'm part of what we call the frameworks team, which is responsible for devising and maintaining our methodologies principally. And I'm joined today by my colleague Wesley, who I'll let introduce himself.
Thanks a lot, Sam. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Wesley Siqueira. I am a product and research advisor here in QS. I work together with Sam, the frameworks team. And basically my main scope is to support the overall delivery of rankings, their results, and also to look at the trends that are happening worldwide in the world of higher education.
Thank you, Wesley. And as mentioned, we have several of our colleagues also in the chat today from our data and institutional support teams who will be trying to answer your questions as we go along. So just to start with, as we always do, just a reminder of the QS mission statement, which you can see on the screen, which is empowering motivated people around the world to fulfill their potential by fostering international mobility, educational achievement, and career development. And we know that this is a shared mission with educators and higher education staff across the globe. And students, as a reminder, are at the heart of everything we do. This is what the rankings are truly designed for. So next, just a reminder that QS is the most trusted brand in higher education. So you can see here the Google Trends from August 2020 to August 2025. And pretty much across the board during that time period, we have been tracking ahead of our closest peers. So next, just a reminder of our ranking suite. So first of all, on the World University Rankings side, we have 5 different projects. So we have the World University Rankings, which is our flagship project, which comes out every June, which most of you hopefully will be familiar with. We have our subject rankings, which look at institutional performance in broad subject areas. We have our regional rankings, which look at various different regions around the globe, and we're in the midst of releasing these at the moment. We have Best Student Cities, which looks at the best cities in the world for studying abroad. And finally, today's topic, the Sustainability Rankings. Next, just a reminder of the release calendar. So you can see that we're coming to the end of the calendar year, but we still have both the sustainability rankings and the European rankings to go. And this whole cycle finishes with subject rankings in March. So next up, just a reminder of the other side of our rankings portfolio, which is Graduate Management Education, or GME. Again, here we have 5 main projects. So we have Global MBA, Executive MBA, Online MBA, the Business Masters, which are a variety of different rankings looking at specialized MBA courses, and also the International Trade Rankings. And again, here is the calendar for the GME side. So all of this information is available both on our support pages, support.qs.com, and the main qs.com website. So next I'm going to hand over to Wesley, who's going to take us through the importance of sustainability.
Thanks a lot, Sam, for this introduction. So as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about why sustainability matters not only in the sector of higher education, but overall to its stakeholders, what they think about it. So in the first slide, we're going to see a few of the high-level results, insights from the Climate Action Barometer from 2025 that has the data about 2024 that has been recently published by the International Education Sustainability Group. And basically here they look at those results about how the international education sector is engaging with climate action. This survey was conducted with 22 institutions representing 10 locations, 10 countries, and almost 200,000 international student enrollments. And we are bringing this third-party perspective to show how the sector throughout many sources, many voices is talking about this important topic. The first main highlight from this survey is that climate change will disrupt higher education by 2030. So basically, more than half of the participating institutions, they expect climate change to impact their operations, their direct operations, by the end of this decade, by 2030. So basically, they really recognize how things that are happening in terms of climate change, it will be affecting their operations. But at the same time, only 1/3 of these respondents, they have emissions reduction targets in place. So it's very interesting here how they are worried about these trends. They are aware that they can be affected by those, but only 1/3 of those respondents, they are actually doing such important things like having actual targets to reduce their emissions. The second highlight is that sustainability is a leadership issue, but action is lagging. And here again from this survey, 64% of institutions, they highlight a commitment to climate action in their marketing actions. However, only 41% of the same survey respondents, they are actually training their staff to communicate sustainability initiatives effectively. So basically, again, there's this gap between what they are communicating, what they are trying to promote in their marketing actions, but not exactly the actions that they do internally in terms of training their staff. And finally, international education's carbon footprint is still very significant. So basically, among those respondents, and again, it was only 22 institutions from 10 different countries, they had total emissions calculated both for international student and staff travel of about 700, almost 700,000 tons of CO2. And if we had more institutions participating in the survey, I'm pretty sure this carbon footprint would be even higher. So only these three points of the survey, of course, the survey has more insights, show us how not only sustainability is important when we talk about it in other areas such as sustainability, education, or research, but also there is the other way, which is how sustainability topics such as climate change and action for climate change is also perceived by the institutions. In the next slide, we're also going to see from the student perspective, based on the International Student Survey that QS has conducted also in 2024, which brings basically the view of those international students, those that we also can call prospective students. They're looking for an opportunity to study abroad. They are in the process of making a decision about an institution or a country to study abroad, and that this survey captures the essence of the opinion of those prospective students. So from the survey that we conducted last year, 88% of prospective students, they have rated sustainability as moderately, very, or extremely important in their process to choose a university or a destination to study abroad. What is also very interesting is that 40% of the respondents, they say that they actively research an institution environmental sustainability strategy. Here we can see, at least in this first layer of the survey results, that those international students, not only they think that sustainability is important, but they're actually actively going out and seeking for proofs, for evidences that these institutions that they want to choose to study abroad, they actually are involved with sustainability, that they have a strategy for environmental sustainability. And we can go even further now in the next slide where we show some couple more of results from another survey, actually, from the Sustainability Student Survey, also from 2024, where we asked students if they would rather choose an institution that prioritize sustainability or they are ranked in a certain ranking position. And the results are actually very interesting. We found out that 48% of them, they prefer sustainability over an university that is ranked among the top 100. 68% said that sustainability is a priority over being top in the top 500, and 78% said that sustainability is a bigger priority over being among the top 1,000. So this is also very interesting to say that uh, ranking it's a very important tool, but for many students, a grade on campus matters more than a high ranking. And also coupled with this, those respondents from the sustainability student survey, 68% of them say that visible green efforts, visible sustainability efforts matter to these students. And here, the final message that we can take from both the first survey and also from the QS surveys is that students, they care about sustainability. Institutions, they perceive the importance of climate change as well. And not only you need to adopt such policies to track your progress against your sustainability goals, but what is also very interesting from these different surveys is that you need to make your efforts visible. You need to communicate them. You need to make sure that students, where they're going to choose your institution, easily they're going to find your sustainable practices and policies and so on. And to illustrate some of these opinions from these students, we have a couple of quotes from two students from the International Student Survey. That the first one saying a student from Indonesia said that the university I applied to implemented environmental and sustainable action towards the programs, which shows a commitment to a better future. And the second quote that we found from one of the respondents, a student from North America, has said that a lot of the universities I've researched are starting to focus on the UN's SDGs, working on the ones which are particularly impactful to their community and students. And this pretty much illustrates the findings of these surveys. And of course, if you want to find more, if you want to see more insights from the sustainability side, QS has actually published a report this year, which is later going to be shared in this presentation. And talking about the QS side of sustainability, of course, this section is about the sustainability rankings, but we can also take a step back and think about what is the QS commitment to sustainability. So of course, overall, we begin by emphasizing how QS is dedicated to support your sustainable development goals, the strategy of your institution towards sustainability, and also to help you to achieve your targets and also to measure your progress. But way more than that, we begin by saying that QS is a certified carbon neutral company since 2019, where QS went through the process of calculating the emission of, basically calculating the carbon footprint of QS, and also including areas such as water use, waste, energy use, company vehicles, office, electricity, and so on. So after doing the calculation, and the QS being able to identify the areas of improvement and setting future targets. QS was certified as a carbon neutral company while also supporting the Acre Amazonian Rainforest Conservation Project in collaboration with Natural Capital Partners. So not only QS is committed to reducing the carbon emission of the company, but also is helping to grow and protect the Amazon rainforest while offsetting our emissions, of course. Next, another dimension, as my colleague Sam mentioned in the beginning, of sustainability is also the social impact dimension. And here we also have some social initiatives that QS supports. Since 2005, QS is involved in philanthropic activities. And nowadays, the flagship initiative is the QS Impact, which is a global charity that recognizes and provides scholarships to a community of young leaders globally. And basically, this QS Impact serves as a global SDG incubator, where young people, they are empowered to participate in programs and competitions, community impact initiatives, and also they take part into recognition opportunities. And the QS Impact has already reached over 160,000 people in the entire world and still counting. And finally, another part of the sustainability action from QS is also terms of governance, so partnerships for the SDGs. And one of these partnerships is the Future 70 initiative, which is co-founded by QS and the University of Exeter. And basically this Future 70 initiative connects students with global and local organizations where they can develop actionable solutions that address the SDGs. And at the same time, these students, while they're still learning, they can also develop their skills that's going to be required for the future of workplace that are those skills also being aligned with the SDGs. Another important partnership is that QS last year was invited to participate at the COP29. Right now we are having the COP30 in Brazil. And last year QS could lead a panel session chaired by our Senior Vice President, Ben Souther, where we had a session about what it takes to run a sustainable university, where it was discussed good practices, the impact of sustainability in higher education, and the overall importance of sustainability rankings as an important tool in this field. And also, it's important to mention that the rankings are released around the same time of when the COP is happening. So this happened last year, and this year, again, we're going to release the rankings while the COP30 is still happening. And finally, what is also important in terms of partnership is within our methodology, which is one of the indicators that recognizes those institutions that are members of a sustainable group. And here we have a number of networks that we recognize, such as the U7 Alliance, the International Sustainable Campus Network, Higher Education Sustainable Initiative, and so on. There are many others. But just to highlight how partnerships are also at the core of what we do for promoting sustainability. But then finally, we reach to the rankings. So rankings being a very important tool. Our understanding is that rankings can help drive change. Of course, rankings should not be the ultimate goal of our institution, but they are very useful tool for making you understand your efforts. And basically, this quote here summarizes this idea, saying that you can't improve what you don't measure. So basically, rankings can help the institutions in their sustainable development cycle. So not only understanding your progress, but also being able to benchmark yourself with your peers and also understand your sustainability efforts across the years. So basically this cycle works in the sense, this graph here shows a little bit about this cycle. In a very simple way, basically you compile and submit data, and this data is an active part of the rankings process, which is also part of the broader cycle of sustainable development, where you can compare your progress against others. You can the information that you receive from the rankings can help you to frame future strategy that can also ultimately lead to enactment of sustainability measures. And finally, these measures that you take, they are again measured and submitted as data that starts the cycle again. So to talk about sustainability rankings itself, basically sustainability rankings provide students with this unique lens on which institutions are demonstrating a commitment to a more sustainable existence. And as my colleague said, the rankings is based on these three main dimensions of sustainability, which are environmental impact, social impact, and governance. Of course, the sustainability ranking is also strongly aligned with the SDGs, with the Sustainable Development Goals. And basically, we understand that QS is the first major university ranking provider. We are very proud to say that not only we have sustainability as its own ranking, but also sustainability is a core part of our methodology for our core rankings, which is the World University Rankings. And as a way to illustrate this commitment with the SDGs. Of course, later my colleague Sam will show how each of the SDGs, they relate to our lenses. But just to illustrate in a more practical way of the target 12.6 from the UN Sustainable Development Goals that says that the country should encourage companies, especially large international companies, to adopt sustainable practices and to integrate sustainability information into their reporting cycle. And this summarizes the idea of the sustainability rankings. Of course, in this case, we have to change companies for universities, for higher education institutions, but the idea is the same, is that through the sustainability rankings, we are encouraging universities to adopt practices, to adopt sustainable policies, but also to encourage them to report those practices and policies. In the next slide, we can also go to the actual headlines of the rankings. So basically, we can see some of the main results and statistics. First of all, what is very interesting is that since the first edition of the Sustainability Rankings, when we published the 2023 edition in 2022, we have seen an exponential growth, basically 186% of growth in ranked institutions if we compare the first edition with this year's edition. We went from 700 for this year to 2001. And this shows not only that we have more institutions that are eligible, they are qualified to be ranked for the sustainability rankings, but also we can see a very interesting growth in institutions that are reporting data to us so we can analyze and measure their sustainability dimensions. And here we have also some of the key statistics for this year, some of the key numbers. And basically, as I mentioned, over 2,000 institutions that have been ranked. From those institutions that were ranked last year, we had almost 600 that had upward movements. 330 institutions, they are new entrants. They are appearing in this edition for the first time. Those 2001 institutions, they represent 108 locations. And among those, we also see that there is one new location that is appearing in the ranking. We also have a couple of headlines from the ranking. So basically, when we take those locations, those countries, in terms of indicator by average score, and then we make this threshold of those locations that have at least 5 institutions in the ranking, we can see that New Zealand leads in 5 lenses. And later, my colleague Sam is going to explain better what is the difference between the lenses, the categories, and the indicators. But basically, we measure this ranking mostly by the lenses here in this presentation. And New Zealand represents the leadership in 5 lenses by average score, while Netherlands in 3 of them. Also, we can see a trend where institutions from either Europe or Asia Pacific, they have the leadership in at least 5 lenses by average score. So we are talking about one institution from Europe that is the top one in one of the lenses, one institution from Asia Pacific that is the leader in one of the lenses, and so on. Also, if we think in terms of these lenses, knowledge exchange is the strongest lens by average score, and environmental sustainability in the flip side is the weakest lens by average score, among other headlines. In the next slide, we're going to see also in terms of representation of these institutions in the ranking. So basically, we have the United States of America as the first country in terms of ranked institutions. So the US this year has 240 institutions in the sustainability ranking, followed by China with 163, UK with 109, but also very important, we have India in the first place, France and Germany, those constituting the top 6 locations in terms of ranked institutions. And overall, as you can see in this table, in this graph, we have a wide representation of regions of the world in terms of institutions ranked. And this also is applies to the rest of the list, where we have many other locations, as I mentioned, 108 with fewer institutions in the ranking. And when we look further, and if we take another angle and think about those locations that have institutions among the top 100, we flip a little bit, the table, and basically we can see that the UK actually is the leader with 30 institutions among the top 100, followed by the US, Australia, and Canada. And basically, we can resonate these four as the so-called big four in higher education. But also we have some other locations like Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, Korea, France, and so on that have institutions among the top 100. And also you can draw comparisons between 2025 edition and the 2036 edition of the rankings. And you can see how actually some locations, they have more institutions in the top 100 and some other they have less compared to the last years. In the next slide, we can also think about the categories. So basically, again, the three main dimensions: environmental in green, social impact in blue, and orange or terracotta in governance. And here you can see the number of ranked institutions among the top 100, not in the overall ranking position, but here specifically in the position within those categories. And here we can see that basically the UK is leading across all three categories, but also Australia, Canada, and Germany, they have strong performances. And here we also have some other highlights. For instance, that Asia locations, they have the opportunity, they could improve in social and governance. The US, they have opportunity that they could have been improving in governance, and Portugal could improve environmental. Just a few examples of where to look at these numbers when you see those illustrations. In the next slide, we're also going to see top locations, top 20 locations by every score. So as I mentioned before, New Zealand is leading among those locations that they have at least 5 ranked institutions. But we also have some other very strong performances by other locations. So if you look at Australia, Belgium, and the Netherlands, they each have average scores above 77. And in some notable lenses such as knowledge exchange, equality, and even environmental research, for instance, for Belgium. And it is also very important to notice that some systems, higher education systems, that they have less institutions here represented in the rankings. And I'm talking about examples such as Singapore, Ireland, and Switzerland. They also appear in the top 20. On the other side, we also see some other larger higher education systems or even those that are more represented in the rankings, such as UK and Canada, that the fact that they are here in the top 20 shows a consistency across a larger system of higher education institutions. And finally, in the next slide, we also have a different way to look at the performance of those institutions, which is the median percentile scores, basically talking about the growth in the performance of these institutions across time. And here we can see how, again, New Zealand is in the leadership with a median percentile of 94% in 2026, which has grown from 79% in 2023. And also some other locations such as Australia, Ireland, and Belgium, they have demonstrated a very strong and stable performance with median percentiles above 88%, among other examples that you can draw comparisons from this table as well. In the next slide, we're going to quickly begin the section about the new entrants, debuts, and dropouts. And basically, there is a difference between new entrants, which are those institutions that they appear in the sustainability rankings for the first time. But we also have debuts, which are those institutions that are entering in the QS rankings for the first time ever at any QS ranking ever. And of course, dropouts, which are those institutions that left this edition of the rankings. We also have a quick graph on this topic. So basically, here we have an interesting movement because we see those locations that had most new institutions in the rankings. And here we see different locations in the leadership. So for instance, we have China with 49 new institutions in the sustainability rankings, followed by India with 26, France, Turkey, and Germany forming the top 5. And again, here we see an even bigger diversity of locations from different parts of the world where they bring new institutions to the rankings. And in the next slide, we also can see a few of the highlights in terms of newly ranked institutions. So as I mentioned before, We have over 300 institutions that appear in these rankings for the first time in this year. And the highest debut in this case, it comes among the top 700, more specifically in the 688 position. We have 21 locations that brought at least one new institution to the rankings, but it's still very important that they had this expansion in terms of representation. 19 locations that had at least 5 new institutions in the rankings, and 6 institutions, they appear in the sustainability rankings and they enter straight into the top 1,000. About China and India, I have mentioned how they are the top 2 locations in terms of new additions to the rankings. And in terms of lenses, health and well-being is the strongest lens for new ranked institutions. But in the flip side, environmental sustainability is the weakest lens for new ranked institutions. Finally, the last session that I'm going to present for now is about movement. So basically here is another way to take a look at these results, not only in terms of their actual scores, actual positions, but here is a comparison between their position last year and this year for those previously ranked institutions, as well as those that are new or remained in the same position in the rankings. So in the first graph, we are going to see those locations that have at least 20 ranked institutions in the rankings, because we want to compare equals to equals in this case. And here you can see some of the trends that, for instance, at the proportional level, there are many different countries from different parts of the world that they had a very similar performance in terms of the proportional part of the institutions that went up or down in the rankings. And for instance, we see some trends, the US having the highest number of downward movements, China also having a significant number of institutions going down. On the other side, we can also see that India had 32 institutions moving up and the UK had 52 institutions moving up. So basically, these data help us to identify which institutions, actually which higher education systems, they are gaining momentum and which one of them are also facing some challenges in the sustainability performance. The next slide, we even break it down further with these results. And here we see in the darker green color, those institutions that moved up by 10 places or more, and in the darker red, the ones that moved down by 10 places or more. And here we can see how, for instance, India, Korea, and Saudi Arabia, they show a very strong upward movement because they have many more institutions there climbing by 10 places or more up, rather those that just climb back by 2 or 3 places, for instance. So this level of movement, this level of breakdown, help us to understand those strategic movements, strategic changes, and basically we can identify where volatility is happening for those locations in the rankings. Again, we take a look in the next slide in terms of largest percentile increase by location, basically this median percentile increase. And here we are talking about still in the topic of movement. So you can see, for instance, how Costa Rica shows the most dramatic improvement, rising from 3% in 2023 to 67% in 2026. So it's a very impressive growth. And some other locations such as Brunei, Lithuania, and Vietnam also show very strong upward trends. So basically these percentile gains, they are very meaningful in ranks that are expanding because they show consistent improvement even as competition increases. This data is very valuable because it helps us to identify emerging leaders and regions that are investing in sustainability. A couple of trends in follow-up movement. So basically, we cannot reveal the results yet. We're going to reveal those in the 18th of November, but we can tell you at least that the largest upward movement moved by 470 places. Lebanon had the highest percentage of institutions moving up, at least among those locations with 5 institutions or more. The UK has the highest number of upward movements of 10 institutions of 10 movements or more up. And we had almost 600 institutions moving up, from which at least 413 of them, they moved up by 10 places or more. In terms of regions of the world, we have Eastern Asia with the most upward movements collectively. And if also see that Taiwan, Hungary, Finland, and Italy, they are the only locations among all the others in the ranking with at least 5 institutions moving up, that all institutions that moved up, they went up by 10 places or more. And finally, environmental education is the most improved lens among those upward movements in the rankings. In the flip side, we also have trends, of course, for downward movements. So the institution that went down the most, it went down by 370 places. South Africa, in proportional terms, has the highest percentage of downward movement. In absolute numbers, we have the US, as I mentioned before, going down, with most institutions going down by 10 places or more. We have almost 900 institutions moving down, from which 533, they went down by 10 places or more. Northern America is the subregion with the most downward movements. And when we look at Czechia and Norway, they are the only locations where all institutions moving down, they decrease by 10 places or more. Of course, we are talking about here about those locations that moved down by at least 5 institutions. And finally, good governance is the most decreased lens among those downward movements in the rankings. And I would like to give back to my colleague Sam to continue now with the methodology and the indicators of the sustainability rankings.
Thank you, Wesley. So as Wesley just mentioned, the remainder of the time that we have, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the methodology and showing some of the trends that we've picked up in each of these categories and lenses. So I should say before we kick off, we will be moving through this very quickly because we are quite tight on time. But if you do miss anything, we will be sharing the slides afterwards so you can take a more sort of balanced look at some of the stuff that we're going to be covering. So first of all, how we break down the rankings. So as mentioned, we have three main categories: environmental impact, social impact, and governance. We have 9 lenses under those 3 pillars, and then we have 52 indicators which fit under those lenses. So you'll probably be thankful to hear that we're not going to be going into every single indicator today, but if you want more information about how those indicators connect up with, particularly with the data that you're submitting, we will be doing a separate webinar about sustainability data submission in, I believe, January. So keep an eye out for that. So next, this is the weightings assigned to each of the 9 lenses. So you can see again that we've everything is sort of color coordinated. So green is environmental impact, blue is social impact, and orange terracotta is good governance. And then next, as Wesley mentioned earlier, this is how they link up with the UN Sustainability Development Goals. So in creating this ranking, we didn't do a one-on-one sync with every SDG because we realized that in a university context, each area is often connected to more than one goal. So the important point here is that every SDG is represented somewhere in the methodology and often in more than one area. So for example, if we look at SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, we see that this goal synchronizes with indicators in 2 lenses: environmental research and equality. And SDG 4, quality of education, pretty much runs across every lens that we have here. So some of these are sort of more tightly synced than others, as we'll see throughout the lenses, but this is sort of our breakdown of where those links are. So next, just a reminder of the sort of different measurements we use and how you can use them as well. So we have basically 3 things that we use: score, rank, and percentile. So starting with score, this is useful when comparing performance between 2 institutions. For example, if your institution has increased its score compared to a peer, even if the rank hasn't changed that much, that score change can be a valuable insight for internal analysis. In terms of rank, this is the most publicly visible and easiest to understand. And if your institution moves from, say, rank 170 to 150, that's a clear improvement of 20 places, and it's very easy to get that message across. And finally, we have percentiles. So Wesley mentioned this earlier. Percentiles we find particularly useful for long-term strategic analysis. For example, if your institution drops in rank over 3 years slightly, but the ranking has expanded significantly, your percentile might actually improve in that time. So this means that you're performing better relative to a larger pool of institutions, and that's a great way to show progress over time. So each of these 3 measures has its strengths, and choosing the right one depends on the narrative that you want to communicate, whether it's about peer comparison, public visibility, or strategic development. So next we're going to dive into the categories and lenses. So starting with environmental impact. So within this category, this basically evaluates how universities contribute to a more sustainable world through their research, education, and operational practices. And it's broken down into the three lenses you can see on the screen: environmental education, environmental research, and environmental sustainability. And together they provide a comprehensive view of how universities are addressing environmental challenges, both academically and practically. So for each category, we're just going to flag a few headlines. So New Zealand coming out with the highest average score here. And we're going to see New Zealand coming up quite a lot in the coming slides. And you can see the percentage of institutions moving up and down by 10 or more places within the category. Next, we've got the category and the three lenses here, and we've got the top 100 locations. So the numbers basically represent the number of institutions each country has in the category on that far left side, and then the three lenses, so environmental education, environmental research, and environmental sustainability. So we can see that overall the UK leads in environmental impact areas in total in terms of the top number of institutions in the top 100. Canada also performing strongly. And it's also interesting to note that some countries are performing particularly well in certain areas. So, for example, we could point to Germany in environmental research or Japan in environmental sustainability. Next, we've got the movement by location. So again, we saw this style of graph earlier. This basically shows you both the percentage and the number. So if you look at the size of the bar, that's the percentage. Then you've got the actual number of institutions represented there. And this again is broken down into up and down moves, both splitting out in the darker colours. Those moves are 10 or more places. 10 or more places is a slightly sort of arbitrary distinction, but it's just one way that we can show you slightly bigger movement. So next we've got the top 20 locations by average score. So this specifically we're looking at environmental impact, which we've highlighted there. So leading the list, as we said, is New Zealand, followed by Belgium and Singapore. And it's important to know that these scores are averages across institutions within each location, so they reflect not just individual excellence, but systemic commitment to environmental sustainability. So first, we have our first lens, which is environmental education, and we're going to highlight on each of these and just remind you which SDGs it relates to, so in this case 4 and 13. So this lens assesses how institutions are educating students to both understand and make a difference to the environment. And it combines academic reputation in earth and marine sciences and environmental sciences, alumni impact data, and the available curriculum on climate-related subjects. And in each of these lenses, we're going to show you the indicators where institutions can submit data in a colour. So you can see the EE3 represented in green there is something that your institution can actually submit data for. So next, the important question of why it's important. So environmental education reflects the university's ability to educate students about sustainability topics, specifically those related to the environment. So if a university is teaching sustainability topics, students have some reassurance that the topics are important to the institution. At the same time, students can also see that the institution has knowledge of the subject and is up to date on the latest developments. At the same time, if an institution is teaching sustainability in its courses and curriculum, this is likely to be reflected in its own practices and policies. And students can also expect a university to not only have committed courses on sustainability topics, but a reasonable expectation that sustainability topics will also feature in the curriculum in other programs and courses. So a few headlines. Again, we see New Zealand coming out on top in terms of the average scores. And what I would draw your attention to here is the upward and downward movement comparisons. So we can see that upward movements in environmental education are often mirrored by improvements in equality. So this suggests that institutions investing in inclusive education are also strengthening their sustainability teaching. And downward moves we're seeing mirrored by declines in environmental research, which may point to broader institutional challenges in maintaining a sustainability focus across both teaching and research. Next, again, we see the top 20 locations. So again, we've highlighted the relevant column here in green. And you can see at the top of the list, as we said, is New Zealand, followed by the Netherlands, Belgium, and Costa Rica. So next, just to introduce a new concept here, which is personas. So basically what we've done here is break down the locations into three distinct groups. So leaders are locations that perform strongly in environmental education, but also score well in the other lenses of environmental impact. So we've highlighted Ireland, New Zealand, and Singapore. Opportunity locations are those that perform well in environmental educations, but have room to grow in other areas of environmental sustainability. And outliers are locations that score highly in environmental education but significantly lower in other lenses. So we can see the opportunities, we've highlighted 5 countries there, and the outliers we have Panama. And then finally we have the largest percentile increase. So we're looking specifically at locations with 5 or more institutions. And as Wesley mentioned earlier, this basically shows the percentage of institutions that are sort of below the number, as it were. So if it's 85% percentile, then you're higher than 85% of other institutions. So at a national level, we can see the Netherlands, Lithuania, and Israel leading the way here. So this is the structure that we're going to follow for the rest of the lenses, and we'll pick up the pace a little bit, just to make sure that we get through everything. So environmental research, you can see links to 8 SDGs. And this lens looks at the impact of the research being done in areas aligned to those SDGs. And it also gives an indication of the relative research environment and attention being given to these crucial topics. We also look at national research and development spend, the presence of a research centre focused on sustainability, and the amount of citations the institution's papers have on policy documents related to the relevant SDGs. So why is it important? Well, environmental research reflects a university's standing in the academic community for sustainability research. So students interested not only in current sustainability efforts, but also future breakthroughs will gravitate towards institutions with a strong reputation in research. At the same time, the university's achievements in the field can be a pull factor if they are communicated effectively. As we saw with environmental education, if an institution is researching sustainability, this is likely to be reflected in its own practices and policies. After graduation, students might find it easier to find a career in their chosen field if their institution has a strong reputation in this field. If the institution has links with industry and sustainability bodies, this can also help secure funding and employment opportunities for its graduates. And postgraduate students may be encouraged that their projects will receive funding if the institution has a strong reputation in this area. So again, a few headlines, again, New Zealand coming out on top, and we draw your attention to the links we've made with upward moves and downward moves in this lens often being mirrored by health and well-being, and this indicates a connection between environmental research and broader societal impact. So next, top 20 locations by average score. Again, we've highlighted the relevant column there in green, and we can see New Zealand, Belgium, and Qatar leading the way. And then when we dive into our personas, we can see the leaders, the opportunities, and the outliers. So an opportunity here for Iceland, Israel, and Qatar, and outliers being Italy and Sweden, who both have a strength in these areas but are slightly weaker in the other environmental impact lenses. And finally, we've got the largest percentile increase. So a bit of a Baltic feel this time with Lithuania and Finland coming out on top. And we also have Egypt, Israel, and Taiwan in the top 5. So our final lens in environmental impact is environmental sustainability. And this lens aligns with SDGs 4, 7, 12, 13, 16, and 17. So this lens assesses the institution's ability, strategy, and operations towards an environmentally sustainable future. So it looks at whether an institution has committed to environmental impact alleviation. And here we're primarily looking at institutional strategy and what institutions are doing on campus. And you can see this has a number of different indicators, several of which institutions can submit data for. So next, why is it important? Well, environmental sustainability focuses on what an institution is doing on campus to reduce its carbon footprint. A sustainable campus creates a positive environment for students, everything from effective waste disposal to a proliferation of plants and trees and the absence of pollution. It also shows that the institution is committed to sustainability principles in practice as well as through its teaching and research. Sustainability can also be an effective marketing tool, so progress towards net zero is an easy to understand statistic that can be highlighted to prospective students to show what steps the institution has taken towards its goals. And finally, if students, faculty and support staff are working and studying in a sustainable environment, they're more likely to take those practices and habits into other aspects of their lives. So again, just a few headlines. So Singapore actually comes out on top in this lens, although New Zealand is the highest among locations with 5 or more ranked institutions. And again, we draw your attention to the comparisons we've done in terms of movement. So upward moves are often mirrored by upward moves in equality, suggesting institutions with inclusive policies may also be proactive in sustainability operations. And in terms of downward moves, they're often mirrored by drops in environmental research, and this can indicate broader institutional challenges in aligning research and operational sustainability. Our top 20 locations, so Singapore, New Zealand, Ireland and Syria, are top 4, Hong Kong coming in 5th. And our personas, so again, leaders, opportunities and outliers. So opportunities here for Azerbaijan and Syria, and outliers Palestine. And you will notice as we go through that there's some locations like New Zealand, like Ireland, that will crop up a lot in terms of the leader categories. And finally, largest percentile increase. So Lithuania again topping the table here, followed by Korea, Belgium, Oman and Hong Kong. So moving on to our second category, which is social impact. So this category recognises the efforts universities are making to transform society for the better, whether that be through equality measures, sharing knowledge, graduate outcomes, or enhancing the student experience. And you can see the 5 lenses that we're going to be looking through here. So first of all, the headlines across the whole social impact category. So Netherlands has the highest overall score, and you can see the percentages of institutional movement up and down by 10 places or more. Next, top 100 locations. So again, you can see the location, the number of institutions they have in the top 100 for the category overall, and then the 5 individual lenses. So the UK again leading across the board, but also strong performances from Australia, Canada and Germany. And there's other locations which have strengths in some areas, but also room for improvement. For example, New Zealand, Portugal and the United States in health and well-being. Again, movement by location for 20 plus institutions. And here we draw your attention to Egypt, Korea, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and Taiwan, and the UK, all showing impressive upward movement of 10 places or more. And the top 20 locations overall by average score. So again, we see the Netherlands leading the way with strengths in employability and opportunities and impact of education. So our first lens, employability and opportunities, linked to 4 SDGs, 4, 8, 9 and 16. So this lens assesses the ability of the institution to propel graduates into strong careers, as well as the strength of connections the institution has with employers. And here we include one of QS's standard indicators, employer reputation, as well as the impact of the institution's research in SDGs. And we also look at unemployment data for the location in question, an institution's industry research partnerships, and the overall satisfaction level of employers with the skills of graduates from each institution, as measured in our employer survey. So again, 4 key reasons why this lens is important. So this looks not only at how well the institution prepares its graduates, but also how in sync it is with other industries and current trends. So it's becoming increasingly important for students to expect concrete employment outcomes from their studies, and they want to know that at a minimum their alma mater will be seen in a positive light by employers. Employer reputation also represents how ready employers feel graduates are for the workplace and what they can expect from future candidates. In certain subject areas, students will want to know what on-the-job experience they can expect to gain during their studies. Spending time with industry partners not only develops knowledge, but also opens up potential career paths. And with skills an increasingly hot topic, students are also increasingly focusing on what skills employers want and how their chosen course and institution helps them to develop these. So again, the headlines, this time the Netherlands coming out on top with an average score of 92.9. And we've seen that institutions improving in employability and opportunities also showed gains in environmental education, suggesting a growing alignment between sustainability-focused curricula and career readiness. And again, the average score and the column in blue is one that we're looking at, so EO. And you can see that the top performers, Netherlands, Singapore, Qatar, Israel, and New Zealand. And then our personas. So we don't have an outlier in this lens, but we do have several leaders and 3 opportunity locations, which are Hong Kong, Qatar, and the United States. And the largest percentile increase, Israel, Italy, Austria, France, and Germany are top 5 here. So you can see a bit of a shift up in terms of what we saw in the environmental impact side. So our second lens is equality, which is linked to 6 SDGs, 4, 5, 8, 10, 11, and 16. And this lens measures a university's efforts to instill not only an atmosphere of gender equality, but of reduced inequalities more widely. So again, we look at research impacts on SDGs. We look at the operational activities of the institution, including the presence of an EDI policy, student and staff gender ratios, the presence of support infrastructure for those with disabilities, and national level statistics on equality, including stats on gender pay gaps, the ratio of women in the workforce, and the percentage of women in roles in political executives. So again, why is it important? Well, equality is ultimately about creating a level playing field for all students and staff to succeed. So students and faculty want assurances that their background, ethnicity, gender, or identity will not impact how they are treated. They also want assurances that the environment in which they study or work is a safe one, where they will not face discrimination. This is true both of the institution and the location where the campus is based. Students and faculty also want to know that equality is not a box-ticking exercise, but something the institution sees as a key pillar of its identity and offering. It's one thing to have equality among the student body and faculty, but both these groups will want to see these same values reflected in the institution's management structure. This not only shows commitment to the policy, but also helps to reduce the impact of narrow thinking or subconscious bias in decision making. So headlines, so New Zealand back up to the top again here with an average score of 97.3. And the key other point to draw your attention to is that most downward moves in this lens are mirrored by drops in environmental research. So this might suggest that broader institutional challenges in aligning research priorities again with social equity goals. Again, we've got the top 20 locations by average score represented in the column in blue. So New Zealand leading the way, Ireland, Australia, Belgium, and Finland in the top 5. So 5 of the locations which are performing pretty well across the board here. In terms of personas, a similar group of leaders, but this time in terms of opportunities, we've identified Lebanon, and an outlier being Northern Cyprus. And here are the largest percentile increase. So Korea, top in the table, followed by Lithuania, Austria, Vietnam, and Tunisia. So our third lens is health and well-being. This is linked to 5 SDGs, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And this lens assesses the institution's commitment to improving health and well-being both on campus and more broadly. It looks at the research impact in 4 different SDGs, as well as national statistics on quality of life and the provision of healthcare on campus, including access to healthy, affordable food and physical, mental, and sexual health services. So it's important because students want to have access to safe and reliable healthcare and related services, giving them the confidence that their studies will not be disrupted by known or unforeseen health conditions and emergencies. Students also want to know the institution provides the healthcare facilities and services they need to remain safe and healthy. They also want to know that they have access to information and support services on campus for things like sexual health. And the location of the institution is also a consideration, and students want to know about the wider state of health in the location they are choosing to study in, including factors such as the presence of disease and access to clean water. And beyond the health of individuals, students and faculty also want to see evidence that their institution is committed to widening knowledge about medicine and public health through research and providing access to information. So in terms of headlines, Belgium now topping the table with the highest average score of 92.4. And what we've seen in this lens is that improvements here are often mirrored by improvements in equality. And both those lenses are largely focused on student and staff welfare, so that's not that surprising. As with equality, downward moves are often mirrored by those in environmental research, which could point to broader institutional challenges in aligning social and research priorities. And here are our top 20 locations. Again, we're looking at the column in blue. And we can see Belgium, New Zealand, Australia, Ireland and Qatar coming out in the top 5 there. And we can also see a contrast in scores in this lens between this lens and environmental sustainability, the ES column you can see to the left. Particularly in Europe, actually, where Portugal, Germany, Spain and Italy all have much lower average scores in environmental sustainability compared to their very high performance in health and well-being. And again, personas, so no outliers this time, but we've got 2 opportunities in Brunei and Korea, and a similar group in the leaders column. So next is largest percentile increase. So we got the top 5 of Lithuania, Finland, New Zealand, Taiwan and Hungary. So impact of education, just 3 more lenses to go. This is connected to quite a lot of SDGs, which you can see on the screen. And this lens assesses the education provision and quality of certain subjects at the institution, which we believe have the greatest potential to positively impact society, those being education, politics, social policy, law, and art and design. It also looks at research into the relevant SDGs, specifically SDG 4, quality of education, the alumni impact in the education sector specifically, and national statistics such as the location's academic freedom, mobility and graduation rates, and expenditure on education. Again, we've got a slide on why it's important. So impact of education taps into the fundamental missions of higher education to promote knowledge and research. So students and faculty want to know about the institution's achievements in specific areas, most closely associated with social policy. So these include the ones we talked about before: education, politics, law, and the arts. They also want assurance that the institution is committed to academic freedom and is open to all forms of research. Evidence of successful alumni is also a factor, with students and faculty wanting to see how alumni have impacted research and policy development in the education field specifically. And the institution's contribution to social policy is also reflected in its reputation. So what standing does it have in academia and in wider society? And is it seen as a force for good and a contributor to progress? So the Netherlands again coming out top here with 90.4 with an average score. And we've seen most upward moves mirrored by improvements in environmental education. So this indicates that institutions investing in sustainability-related curriculum are also seeing broader educational impact. On the other side, downward movements are often mirrored by declines in environmental research, which again points to a disconnect potentially between research output and its integration into teaching or social engagement. Again, we can see the column identifying in blue the top 20 average scores. So the top 5: Netherlands, Australia, Belgium, Israel, and New Zealand. And we're seeing big differences here between scores in this lens and in environmental education and sustainability. So if you look at the likes of Malta, Iceland, and Norway, who have a much higher score here than they do in those environmental lenses. And similar locations also have discrepancies between this lens and their scores in governance. So our personas, again, similar group of leaders: Austria, Iceland and Slovenia, the 3 opportunities, and Cyprus and Malta are outliers. And in terms of percentile, Austria, Italy, Germany, Belgium and United Kingdom are top 5 performers. So our final social impact lens and the penultimate lens overall, knowledge exchange, which is linked to the SDGs number 4 and number 10. And this lens evaluates how institutions collaborate to share knowledge and drive educational progress. It reflects the university's commitment to improving academic standards, not just within its own walls, but also across the global education landscape. And we can see that we've got 4 key indicators here. So knowledge exchange is important because it considers the university's core social mission. Is it a positive influence in the local and national community? And does it contribute more widely to knowledge and progress? So students and faculty want to know not only about the institution itself, but also about wider trends in the location and region, and how committed the institution is in widening and spreading knowledge. It's one thing to look after the needs of students and faculty, but how is the university perceived more widely? What does it contribute to its local community? How close are those ties? Does the university actively contribute to the development of social policy? Is it involved in discourse at a national level? And there is no better way to judge an institution's nature than by seeking the views of those who work and study there. So students and faculty will want to know whether the external reputation matches the perception of those on campus. So again with our headlines, so Costa Rica the highest average score overall, but the Netherlands coming in top amongst locations with 5 or more ranked institutions. And we draw your attention to the downward movement, where most downward moves in this lens are mirrored by declines in environmental research, and this may indicate a disconnect between research output again and its integration into teaching or societal engagement, as we've seen before. So again, top 20 locations by average score. So our top 5 are Costa Rica, Netherlands, New Zealand, Australia and Belgium. And as we can see here also that the lens has the largest discrepancies in score generally across the social impact category. So positive scores in this lens do not necessarily translate into positive scores in the other lenses across social impact. So the larger locations are strong across the board, but there's a lot more outliers in this lens, as we shall see. So as mentioned, you can see similar groups of leaders, 3 opportunities, Malaysia, South Africa and Vietnam, but a lot more outliers here, i.e. those locations which are performing very well in this lens, but are slightly lower, or fairly significantly lower, in fact, in the other lenses in social impact. So Bangladesh, Costa Rica, Egypt, Lebanon and Serbia. And then our percentile increases, again, New Zealand coming up top, followed by Thailand, Jordan, Australia and Hungary. And Australia has the highest percentile score among the group with 89%. So finally, just to finish up our analysis today, we're going to look at governance, our final category. So this category looks at the centrality of ethics, good hiring practices, open decision-making in the presence of democratic bodies such as the Students' Union. We have one lens in this category called good governance, which broadly aligns with the 6 SDGs you can see on the screen, 4, 5, 10, 13, 16 and 17. And in terms of indicators in this category, they include the university's stance on ethics, publishing transparency, the roles of students in decision-making, and how often the institution's research is cited in policy related to SDG 16 specifically, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So good governance is important to students because they want to know that their institution's activities are undermined by a commitment to a code of ethical behaviour. This in turn needs to be backed by effective structures to ensure that these ethical codes are followed and upheld. Part of that process is a commitment to transparency in terms of strategic and financial activity. And students also want to know that their own rights will be upheld and respected and that they have a voice to express opinions about their institution's direction. So here's the movement obviously across both the category and the lens, which are the same. And you can see here the movement. So Canada, Egypt and the UK, the locations that are closest in terms of parity between upward and downward movement. But you can see a lot of the leading countries seeing quite a lot of downward movement within this category. So headlines, New Zealand claiming the final top spot with the highest average score of 94.4. Upward movement we're seeing in good governance is often mirrored by improvements in equality. So this suggests that institutions with inclusive governance structures tend to perform better in promoting diversity and equitable access. And downward movement, on the other hand, is frequently mirrored by declines in environmental research. So again, this might point to broader institutional challenges where weak governance structures could be limiting the effectiveness of sustainability-related research initiatives. Our top 20 locations by average scores are in the final column now, and you can see New Zealand, Costa Rica, Australia, Lithuania and Ireland, our top 5. And you can see beyond the locations with strengths that we've seen, those locations we've seen with strengths across the board, like New Zealand and Australia, Belgium and Ireland, we do see quite a much changed mix of locations here, showing that governance like knowledge exchange is not as closely aligned with the other areas of sustainability in terms of performance. And the largest percentile increases to finish up, we have Switzerland, Vietnam, Brazil, Belgium and Portugal in our top 5. So that is the end of the analysis section. We are running slightly over time, but I'm just going to hand back now to Wesley to finish off the presentation.
Thanks a lot, Sam. And we are aware that we have been a little bit over time, but just in this last minute to talk about very few things that are very important to us. So if you can go quickly to the next slides, please. In the first one, just key dates because lots of people has asked about it. And basically, you should have received your first fact file on the 22nd of October. Today we have the external webinar, and the second fact file should be in the 17th of November, actually, one day before the rankings release, which is on the 18th of November. And stay connected with us. So of course we have many more different webinars. As my colleague Sam mentioned before, we are going to have a sustainability data collection webinar in January, and also different webinars on insights or other ranking launches. You can also enter in our websites qs.com, topuniversity.com, and Top MBA. And also you can follow the QS LinkedIn page and my personal and Sam's profiles for more rankings, insights, and trends. Stay connected with us also through the digital media pack, where you can download it and use the templates for sharing your ranking success on social media. Also, if you haven't signed up for MyQS, is the QS free platform for you to see your rankings performance with interactive dashboards, historic performance, and also there you're going to find the badges and certificates all in one place. A self-managed platform that you can use for your team. So if you haven't signed up yet, you can scan this QR code or get in touch with our team. Finally, HolonIQ by QS as well. It's a new platform that provides billions of data points. You can see the connection between all the rankings data, performance, benchmarking across 150 countries, and also lots of different interactive dashboards. So you can also scan the QR code and get your access to the HolonIQ platform. We also have a new report that has been launched very recently now in November, how universities are shaping Asians tomorrow. So specifically a report on trends driving growth, sustainability, employability, and collaboration across 10 Asian nations. The QS conference calendar, of course, we are now having in November the QS Eurasia Forum. You can also meet us in the Reimagine Education Conference and Awards in December in London. And then next year we begin the calendar with the India Summit, and it goes on across many summits and forums in the year. And QS Insights magazines for more trends and insights, special interviews in the world of higher education. And we have the midweek brief as well. And finally, we mentioned many insights, trends, and survey results about sustainability. Most of those came from this new report, Shaping Sustainability Future Students, Universities, and Green Skills, that you can also download from the QS website. And I think this was it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your patience, and have a good rest of day or rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone. And obviously be sure to look out for the rankings launch on the 18th of November. And just a reminder as well, there will be a short survey popping up when we finish the session. We would appreciate any feedback that you have about things you'd like to see in the future, or anything different you'd like to see from these sessions. So yes, thank you very much for attending.